So, Royden, can you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I will. Good afternoon, folks. Steve, can you hear me? All right. Good afternoon. My name is Royden Powell. I work for the Maryland Department of Agriculture, and as part of this program today, we thought it might be helpful to update you on where we were with certain nutrient management issues. I know Dwight's rolled through a presentation, and he and I have been bouncing back and forth, deliberating what my piece of this talk might be. With the phosphorus management tool, it has been on the table now for about 2 years or more, actually 2 years in an actual promulgation process. I was prepared up until last Friday to talk about the economic analysis and the results of that and where we might go in light of those findings by Dr. Dotterer from Salisbury. But last Friday, things took a bit of a change in course when we got direction from the governor's office to submit a proposed regulation that would actually implement a phased-in approach for the nutrient management, the phosphorus management tool. So the governor's goal from the beginning has been to implement this new requirement. He saw it as a commitment that the state had made as part of the state's commitment to EPA under our WIP, that we would update our current risk assessment tool from the phosphorus site index to the PMT. So with that commitment, the department had prepared a regulation after having talked with a variety of sectors within the agriculture industry. We talked to the dairy industry separately, we talked to grain producers, we talked to organic producers, talked to grain farmers, all with specific and individual and separate issues and concerned about what this proposal might mean for them in terms of their operation, how they were going to remain viable, how they were going to have plans developed and implemented in a way that allowed them to continue to be profitable, continue to have assurances that they would be good over the long term. So those we heard a variety of issues, and everything from how the proposal was going to change how they farmed, the management required, impacts to bottom line, the fact that, and this was probably more of an Eastern Shore issue, but given that poultry litter is really a commodity in this part of the state as a source of crop nutrients, what the proposal might do in terms of that market for that commodity and how drastically that market might change based on how a proposal would be implemented. There was a question about whether there was sufficient infrastructure on the shore or anywhere really to handle manure, to load it, to transport it, to ramp up application if people who had not used manure in the past would be under the proposal, given that a fair amount would be relocated. There were perceptions, there continue to be perceptions about phosphorus availability, and this is expressed in terms of how much P is really available from the soil based on what that soil test is telling you. So recognizing that today, under the PSI and under the proposed PMT, it still is only triggered when you get a soil test phosphorus of 150 or higher. The question remains for certain producers is how much of that phosphorus is actually available, plant available, and can we rely entirely on that residual soil that's in the P to be plant available and meet those crop needs. So there were perceptions about that P availability and how it affects the potential that it might affect yield. Recognizing also there are certain crops with high P diets, primarily in the vegetable arena, but when you look down the 1B1 list in the university recommendations, there's any number of crops that even at optimum P level, the university is calling for 100 pounds of phosphorus. Sometimes at planting, sometimes pre-plant broadcast incorporated. But nonetheless, it's an indication that certain plants need more P than others. And it also is a nod or a point to the fact that when Frank Cole before him and then later Josh did their work on the PSI, that field research was primarily focused on what I'll call major row crops. It was corn, wheat, soybean rotation, P availability in those major crops. So again, to the extent that there were other crops that had not been part of that research and needed more P, that was a concern from vegetable producers. Organic producers had a similar concern, recognizing in order to maintain their certification, they have to rely on inputs that meet those standards. So they're relying largely on organic sources, including manure. 10 minutes. I've got a roll. So how they meet those needs, and if in fact they were in a high P situation. And finally, this one's important. If we put money on the table to adopt new technologies, and the producer still ended up being high, under the proposal, the original proposal, when you were at high, it meant 0 additional P. And 0 is 0. And if the new technology didn't get to 0, what is the incentive for that farmer to adopt that new technology? Because at the end of the day, he has no output, no opportunity, no flexibility to use that material coming out the other end if in fact it has some P in it. So that was a concern that we tried to address. So what we've built is a proposed, it was submitted last Friday, is a phased-in approach. It's phased in time, it's phased in a manner called risk, and it's a phases management. The risk phasing deals with the fact that we have to bring this body of farms, particularly on the shore where you've got this volume of litter, and it's estimated at, one estimate's about between 225 and 235,000 tons that are going to be on the market when the PMT is fully implemented. So how do you incrementally transition that group so as not to disrupt the market and gradually move that group from where they are to the PMT? So the concept is to develop what's called risk tiers. There's a high-risk tier, a mid-risk tier, and a low-risk tier. Those tiers are based on what we propose to call an average soil P FIV value. So you would take all the fields in that operation that were over 150 and average it. That number becomes the average, what I've described as the average P FIV value. If that average number is 450 and higher, and there are some that are out there, that's a high risk. The average value of 300 to 450 is in the mid tier, and the 150 to 300 is in the low tier. That value is used only to determine a schedule that I'm going to talk about. When you write the plan, you still plan each individual field according to the individual field's FIV. So that field's FIV would be what would be plugged into the PMT to calculate the risk. This risk thing is just, the tier is just to establish a schedule. The high risk, as I say, are over 450. They would be the first to begin this transition process that I'm going to talk about. A year later, this mid-risk tier starts, and then the third year in, the low-risk tier starts. So those with the highest risk have the longest period to transition. The low risk is a shorter schedule. Management phasing is something else that I talk about, because this degree of change that will affect certain farms, some more than others, has to be dealt with, and I believe it's best dealt with incrementally. Instead of going cold turkey from A to B, you've got to have these, what I call incremental changes. So what's proposed are these transition managements, and there's 3 steps. There's a transition management phase 1, transition management phase 2, and then the PMT. So I'll show you a table of what that means. But because of the way subsurface drainage on the shore and distance to water everywhere else affect the score, there's in some cases, radical difference between where someone would rate or score out under the PSI versus PMT. So that's the need, what I believe, to require this gradual change. I think I just covered all of that. This 3-step at the bottom of the slide, there's a 3-step process. So the person would go from where they are at the PSI first to this transition management phase for a period of time, either a year or 2 years. The second step is to go from transition management phase 1 to 2, and then the final step is to go to the PMT. So in this transition management, you'll see the risk score there on the left column, which is you would calculate the PMT the way you do now, but instead of using the management requirements that are in the extension bulletin, these interim management would be required. So that first column, for example, if you scored low, you'd have an end-based plan not to exceed 3-year crop removal of P. Medium would be 3-year crop removal P, and high would be 1-year crop removal P. So what you're going to notice is this table, the incremental change as you go from the left side to the right side is incrementally tighter or more restrictive, if you will. It's obviously also more restrictive when you go from the top, which is low, to the highest risk at the bottom. So the idea is to move people through this schedule over time and allow that management change to occur on a gradual basis. The time phasing that we're proposing is a 6-year schedule. So assuming that the regulation would be effective in February of next year, in crop year, and recognizing that many plans are already going to be written for 15 at that point. So for crop year 15 and 16, you'd run both the phosphorus site index and the PMT when a plan was being written. You'd provide the farmer the management changes that would be required when the PMT was ultimately required, so he has information about what he has to do differently. During that period, you and actually I mean you in this case, would calculate this average P value that would determine the tiers. So the way the reg is drafted, certified consultant does that calculation. He has the plan in hand. He has all that data and has the capacity and can do it quickly. And it only gets done one time. So he would do that calculation, report it to MDA by September of 16, and then in 2017, implementation would begin. Implementation would begin with people that are in that high-risk tier, 450 and above. So they have, jump past it. They have 5 years to transition. They're fully implemented by 2021. In crop year 18, a year later, the lower tier group starts. So they have a 4-year process. They're fully implemented by 2021. 2019, the low risk tier begins. They have a 3-year process again. They're done by 2021. In fact, everybody, by 2021, everyone is fully implemented. So this table summarizes that. So that first row where you have the high FIV tier, in 2016, everybody is operating under the PSI. 2017, you'll see the first group, that high group, begins transition management phase 1. They're in that for 2 years. In 2019, they go to phase 2. They're in that for 2 years. 2021, they go to PMT. And then there's a related schedule, but you can see it's staggered, if you will, from right to left, so that the start for that in the mid FIV tier begins a year later at 18, and then the low FIV tier begins in 2019. So the message is that it's over a 6-year period, it's a staggered process, and by 2021, everybody is there. Process-wise, as I say, the first step is for the department to submit the proposal to the AELR committee. That happened last Friday. They have to have it 15 days before it's published in the register. That publication is scheduled now for December 1st. There is a 30-day comment period that begins once that publication comes out December 1. And then the department can adopt the regulation 45 days after that publication date, and that falls somewhere around January 16th. So assuming a lot of things, that's the schedule that I think the governor's office is expecting to complete. For more information, I recognize I'll breeze through this very quickly, but an actual copy of the proposal, along with the whole AELR package that includes the economic impact statement, the economic impact analysis done by Dr. Dotterer, and probably this presentation as well, the other things that I just mentioned are all already on the website. We're going to post this tomorrow, but it's under www.mda.maryland.gov, and that's You'll find that under the hot topics, which is a column on the right side of the page at the top. Questions? Time for questions?
Yeah, 1 minute, and then we're technically in the break period transition.
Oh my God, I can't be in the break period. Okay, it's on you. I'm in your break time now.
Stick around.
It's almost as bad as being in your lunchtime. Any questions? I'll be around for a while if you want to catch me in the hall or whatever.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.